So I recently got together with a guy from my hobby. He asked me out first and I had some doubts that we'd work together as a couple because of the age difference. He's 35 and I'm 22. So, in my apartment, since it's an old house that was originally a single-family house, there isn't much soundproofing. And the floors creak when people move. I've gotten used to the sound of the guy upstairs getting up at 4 a.m. since he starts work at 5. And the sound of the girls in the apartments to either side of mine watching telenovelas till midnight, taking work calls all day and having friends over on weekend nights. I know when I play music or have friends over, some of the sound leaks through the walls. So I'd never get upset about hearing my neighbors because it goes both ways. So, when my boyfriend started coming over more often, he had complaints about the neighbors, which put me in an awkward place. He wanted to go speak to them or have me text them and I said no. For example, one of the early times he stayed over we went to bed around 10. He wanted me to ask my neighbor to turn down her TV. I said she didn't have it that loud and she turns it off at midnight anyway. At 4 a.m., he got very irritated with my upstairs neighbor getting up and cooking breakfast. I said that he would be done by 5 because that's when his shift starts. At 7 a.m., he was still trying to sleep in and the neighbor on the other side had some work calls that he said he couldn't sleep through. I offered him earplugs and he said he couldn't sleep with them in either. He wanted me to ask her to quiet down. He had similar comments every time he heard someone else in the building just living their life, especially if it was when he was in bed. I got frustrated with my boyfriend and told him, you can't expect to date a hot young 22-year-old and not want to deal with a 22-year-old's living situation. I don't know if you realize, but this is a normal apartment for someone my age. Hell, my neighbors are pretty great. Nobody's throwing loud parties on work nights. Nobody's having screaming fights. Nobody's having babies. The hot young part was in sarcastic air quotes because those were his words, not mine. He got irritated and asked why I was bringing age into it. And I said it's because he can't both want someone so young and also want someone with house kinda money. And he was being so out of touch with how normal people in their 20s live. He got really irritated with me bringing age into it. And even more annoyed when I'd respond to his neighbor complaints in the future with, okay, boomer. Or tell him that if he wanted me to have a rich person apartment, he could pay for it. It's not possible for me to get to his house on my own because I don't have a car and the buses don't go that far into the suburbs. So that would mean him driving 30 minutes from his house in the suburbs to pick me up, then an extra 30 to drive me to his house. Then an hour round trip early in the morning to get me home in time for work. It's a lot easier for him to visit me in the city. I am using boomer as a joke or a figure of speech to say acting out of touch and entitled to tell other people what to do. It is a common figure of speech to say, okay, boomer, to someone who is acting entitled regardless of their actual age. It's more of a mindset thing. I googled his property records for his house and he CO owns it with a woman who shares his last name. Holy shit. I don't know if she's his wife or ex-wife or what, but I'm out of here. I'm honestly freaking out right now, but I just gotta say, great big thank you to everyone who noticed red flags and made me question that. I've blocked his number. He can have fun figuring out where I went. I've got cerebral palsy that affects both my legs and one arm. That's my official diagnosis, but what you really see is I walk with a limp. I'm a software developer, so job-wise, I don't have any issues. I knew when I was a kid that using my brain is the best way for me to survive on my own without relying on other people. I haven't had the chance to get my driver's license, but according to therapists and doctors that shouldn't be an issue. That's the background about me. My girlfriend and I have been together for a year. We met back in April 2020 of last year and we decided to get together in May 2020. I told her about my disability before then, but she wanted to try and make it work. We video call on Discord every day, almost always when we're awake, and recently we've been going on dates. She's more than happy to lend me an arm and she notices things about me that even I miss myself. Outside of my family, she's the most loving and caring person I know, and she's my motivation to do better and improve myself. Honestly, I never thought I could find someone I trusted enough to share my more negative thoughts and problems. I always tried to seem happy so I don't worry others. The emotional support she gives me is really irreplaceable. The problem is scared that, in the future, she will have to take care of me or most of the work will fall onto her. To make matters worse, her mom has been telling her for the past few weeks to break up with me because she can find better, and she doesn't want her to have the burden of caring for me. She's also really afraid that I will get arthritis early due to my cerebral palsy, and if that happens, a lot is going to be on her. I've tried doing things like stretches and exercises to maintain and improve my muscle tone, but she is still afraid I'll get worse. I'm an introvert, I don't know a lot of people, and honestly, I don't even know the options I've got to look at. I want to prove that I can be independent and that if things do go wrong, it won't just be on her. I'm in Ontario, Canada. Are there things I can look into and do to assist with my disability, or things I can look into so if things do go wrong, I won't be a burden on her? I'm at the end of my wits. I've never really hated my disability, but I've always kept myself going by tempering my expectations and thinking, my disability is going to make it really hard to find someone, and she's the first person to make me feel like, yeah, it doesn't matter. I want to do anything to show her that I won't hold her back in the future, but I'm out of ideas. Is there anything I can do? I don't want to worry anyone I'm with these issues, but I'm at the end of my wits. I don't even know if my relationship is lost, but I don't want this to happen again, and I want to know what I can do myself so I can reassure my partner, so they know I won't hold them back in the future. I don't know if there are things I can look into to better plan my future so it's not a concern for my partner. The worst part is, I've always thought my disability doesn't matter. But with all of this happening, it's really hard to convince myself otherwise. I have been with my partner for 7 years. We initially met online, and after meeting in person a few times, and realizing our affection for one another, we found it promising to move in together. I moved from California to Pennsylvania to be with him throughout graduate school. All was seemingly well during this time. I have never really had any reason to not trust him. I encouraged him to, very much so, to try his best to make friends, or to explore hobbies on his own outside of the various ones we share, because I have my own passions. And I found we connected most when we met in the middle through conversations about these passions, through the act of explaining or showcasing what we've taken in or learned. Throughout these 7 years, he has struggled with very low self-esteem, and though I don't necessarily think of myself as the pillar of self-love, the depth of mine doesn't reach the low perception of his self-value. Because of this, he has seen and stopped seeing both a counselor and a therapist, and has been on medication to help for the last 6 months. Things were seemingly well between us, and continued to be pretty fluid. We continued to share things, and take long walks, and were pretty open-ended about where we stood in the relationship. If one was feeling a bit of an ebb, the other would pick up more of a share, and vice versa. However, things took a bit of a dip about 2 days ago when I felt the ebb and asked him about it. Initially, he said there was really nothing wrong. And perhaps I was just feeling this way because with our schedules we haven't been able to see one another for long periods of time like we are used to, which is true. But the feeling continued to irk me, and when I asked about it a second time, he confessed to me. He had begun talking to another girl from another country via Instagram direct messages. And though things between she and him never crossed the boundaries of platonic friendship, he really loved the initial rush of someone asking him questions about his favorite movie, his favorite album, his favorite book. All things he and I already know very well about one another. I asked if he'd sent any selfies, or anything risque, and he said no, though I can't confirm, because he deleted the messages. A good deal of me believes him, because of how open he was about the initial conversations to begin with. We slept apart, and I just felt really confused the entire night, because I couldn't really resonate with wanting that sort of attention from someone else. If anything, his yearning for that type of attention sort of hurt. It felt like I wasn't doing enough, or giving enough. The next morning, though I don't have an Instagram, and am not on the app, I went to check his using the desktop version, and found that posts where he once called me the love of his life, or a specific post with a gift I gave him that once said, "Greatest gift from the greatest girl," were still on his profile, but the words, girlfriend, or love of my life, were completed erased. With this realization, my confusion and hurt turned to very real heartache. I called him and asked if he had deleted these words from the specific posts, and with shame, he said yes, he did. When I asked why, he said it was because he just didn't want the attention from the girl asking him about himself to be disrupted. If she found out he was in a long-term relationship. I guess this is where I asked the obvious and questioned why someone who is just asking about your favorite books, movies, etc. would be driven away by the fact that you have a girlfriend. And he said he didn't know why he did it, and that it was a massive mistake. At the risk of seeming toxic, and I will take full accountability for seeming so or being so. I asked him to please deactivate his Instagram for the time being while we sort through this, his Twitter as well. He did, and though I was feeling a bit of relief about that, I couldn't help but feel a bit saddened that he didn't choose to do that on his own for the benefit of our relationship. He had to wait for me to ask. Which again, just made me feel like such a toxic and controlling partner. Two things I always strive to be so far from. When he got home from work, we discussed everything at massive length, and he continued to swear up and down that these conversations pertained strictly to music, movies, and books, and he didn't have interest in her. Just interest in the initial rush of the attention he was receiving. We read a few articles, and he broke things down to me as his self-esteem has never been lower. Despite his career as a doctor being at a high, and his finances in order, he felt things with his music weren't taking off. And with that came a feeling that he wasn't special, and it was nice for someone to make him feel that way. I felt shame and asked him if I wasn't doing enough or giving enough to him to make him feel that way. He said, I defiantly was. But my love, and attention and affection, became a pillar he could rely on, and got used to, so with new attention came a rush. And he liked that. I asked him if he wanted to be single, and find that rush in dating new people. And he kept insisting that that's so far from what he wants. He wants to remain a couple, and do all he can to work on these things together. Though I can't help but correlate that feeling he enjoys with the feeling of a first date. Which hurts, of course. I told him I didn't really see how we could move past this because there was nothing much for me to make an attempt to work on moving forward. This seems to be a self-stemming problem that I emphasize with, but just don't want to be on the receiving end of the counter effects. So though it is incredibly uneasy to begin to think of how difficult it'll be to begin again, it is just as difficult to think about how difficult it would be to stay and try to rebuild back up an issue that I feel like just a bystander. When it comes to, this has all been very painful, and if this comes to an end I just want it to be as civil and as possible. He deserves to love himself, but not at the expense of the love we have between us. I deserve love that is stable and comforting, and not laced with newfound paranoia. Despite this all, my heart is still very much in this, of course, and he has been very vocal about how it was just one mistake. Nothing happened, we can work through this, etc. And I secretly keep hoping he will make a step, any step really, to showcase these words and implement action, seek a new therapist. Find the two of us a relationship counselor, buy a book on self-help or on how couple conquer affairs, anything at all. Without me having to be the one to ask him. I just want him to have that yearning that he continues to say he has, but instead of saying it, I was him to show me. That makes me irrational or just plain dumb. I believe to be in a state where I can handle either answer. Or something completely different just the same. Do all think I'm blowing something completely out of proportion? Given how this was an exchange of conversation between him and another girl for just a few days. And his erasure of me on his profile was only for about 2 days? This has been a first in this relationship, this has been a first in my life truthfully. I just felt completely vulnerable and isolated. I have 3 children, the oldest being 16M. For my birthday last week my son went out and bought me this swinging hammock chair that I had been wanting for 2 years, and it cost him quite a bit of his saved money, which I fully intend to put back into his bank account so he can continue saving. He was so excited to see me open this gift and couldn't wait to help me set it up. I told him he shouldn't have, that it was a lot of money, and his response was, "You never get anything nice. I wanted you to have it." And it was true. I usually don't get anything for my birthday or Christmases outside of Tupperware or soaps. So it might sound stupid, but I have cherished this swing ever since he got it for me. Especially where I finally have something nice that's mine. My sister-in-law comes over once a week to see all of us, and she immediately headed straight for my swing, which my son hooked up on our deck. I told her to please not sit on it, and she said, "Is there a weight limit?" So I told her yes, 250 pounds, and I even showed her the box to confirm. She was not upset about this. She just said that's a bummer. They need to make something capable of holding us big girls. I simply agreed with her and went about my business. At this point my husband shows up from work. When I went inside to grab us some drinks, her and my husband are talking on the porch, and not even 5 minutes later I hear a loud crash. I go out and sure enough she had sat in my swing and the crochet netting around the hook snapped on one side, causing her to fall right on her ass. She is sitting there laughing, gets up and says, "I guess I need to learn to listen." So I lost it. As I said above, I literally never get anything nice. Never. This is the one thing that I had that was mine, and it didn't even take someone a freaking week before they ruined it for me. So I said, "I literally just told you not even 20 minutes ago that it would not hold you, and to please not sit in it." She makes some comment about usually the weight limit is a lie. I thought it would hold. So I said the weight limit probably would have held if you were only 50 pounds heavier than it, not 150. She is 420-ish lbs because she is one of those girls who eat food on camera for money, and she absolutely loves her weight. But regardless, instead of apologizing or offering to compensate me for my destroyed item, she has resorted to saying I'm a shitbag for making her feel like her weight is a problem and my husband is on her side.